This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today we'll feel and experience Long Beach, featuring an interview with wonderful Archer Tindall.
I'm an outdoors person, so I spend a lot of my time on the beach. So I cannot be any happier living in Long Beach. I've lived a lot of different places within LA County, and this is by far my favorite. And definitely, if you're an outdoors person, obviously it's got everything you need. But even if you're not, it is a great place. We have an amazing food scene, we have an art scene, we have a music scene. So there's no shortage of activities. It is a very vibrant, bumping place for sure.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to feel and experience Long Beach? Long Beach has always been a city shaped by its relationship with the ocean. Its story begins long before it was called Long Beach, when the Tongva people lived along its shores, thriving on the wetlands, fishing, and trading along the Pacific. Spanish explorers passed through in the late 1700s, and by the mid-1800s, the land was part of the massive Rancho Los Cerritos and Rancho Los Alamitos, both granted under Spanish and Mexican rule. By the late 1800s, the area transformed into a seaside resort. Visitors flocked to what was then called Wilmore City, named after developer William Wilmore, before it was officially incorporated as Long Beach in 1897. The town quickly earned the nickname Iowa by the Sea, as thousands of Midwestern families, many from Iowa, settled here, drawn by the promise of health, sunshine, and ocean breezes. In fact, Long Beach became famous in the early 1900s as a hub for health tourism, with visitors coming to breathe in the salty air and stay in its grand hotels. One of the most enchanting corners of Long Beach is Naples, a neighborhood built on imagination and engineering. In 1903, developer Arthur M. Parsons conceived a community modeled after Venice, Italy. To bring his vision to life, dredging crews carved out 3 islands in Alamitos Bay, Rivo Alto, Naples, and Lido, laced them with canals, and built arched bridges connecting the neighborhoods. By 1905, lots were being sold for as little as $350, promoted as the dreamland of Southern California. Gondolas were imported, and for a brief moment, it truly felt like a slice of Italy had been dropped into Southern California. But life in Naples wasn't always easy. The canals and infrastructure fell into disrepair during the Depression years, and after the 1933 Long Beach earthquake, one of the most devastating in California's history, the community faced additional hardships. Yet resilience won out. Residents revitalized the canals in the late 1930s, and a new tradition was born, decorating homes and boats for the holidays. This grew into the Naples Island Holiday Boat Parade, which launched in 1946 and continues today, attracting thousands of spectators every December. Meanwhile, the broader city of Long Beach was making its mark. In 1924, the discovery of oil on Signal Hill turned the region into one of the richest oil fields in the world, fueling economic growth. During World War II, the port of Long Beach and the nearby Douglas Aircraft Company became vital to the war effort, employing thousands and shaping the city's industrial identity. After the war, the port grew into one of the busiest in the nation, a title it still holds today alongside its neighbor, the Port of Los Angeles. Naples, however, has always held onto its charm. Strolling its bridges and canals, you'll find a blend of architectural styles, Mediterranean villas, Cape Cod cottages, sleek modern builds, all facing the water, with private docks holding kayaks, paddleboards, and sailboats. Gondola Gateway, established in the 1980s, continues the Italian tradition, offering rides through the canals where visitors can drift under bridges and past glowing lights at sunset. Today, Naples stands as both a neighborhood and a living story, a testament to how Long Beach has always been a city where imagination meets the sea. From oil booms to naval history, from Midwestern settlers to Italian-inspired canals, it's a place of reinvention and resilience, with a soul that has never stopped being drawn to the water. And here we are. Welcome to Long Beach. I'm so excited to have Archer Tindall with me today. Archer Tindall is a film director, producer, and writer. She connects individual stories with contemporary public conflicts and policy debates through documentary filmmaking and fiction scriptwriting. In addition to her independent feature documentary, 27 Months Journeys in the Peace Corps, she has produced documentaries for National Geographic Television, HBO and PBS. She runs Film Archer, an educational production company that produces content for major universities and nonprofits. She has a master's in public policy from the Luskin School of Public Affairs at UCLA and a master's in documentary film from Stanford University. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago. She was raised in the San Gabriel Valley and now calls Long Beach home with her chill husband and rambunctious dog. Hello, Archer.
Hi, Masha. Thanks for doing this. I love speaking with you.
Oh my God, I was so looking forward to this conversation. You have no idea. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a special guest on my podcast.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful. So Long Beach, where you live, is such a unique part of Los Angeles. It's vibrant, diverse, and it's right by the ocean. So how does living in Long Beach feels like for you?
Exactly how you described it. Vibrant, diverse, and right by the ocean. We have obviously some of the best weather in all of Southern California. I can absolutely brag about that. It's, we have our marine layer usually in the morning, so we stay a little bit cooler, but then we have glorious afternoons, amazing sunset. I'm an outdoors person, so I spend a lot of my time on the beach. So I cannot be any happier living in Long Beach. I've lived a lot of different places within LA County, and this is by far my favorite. And definitely, if you're an outdoors person, obviously it's got everything you need. But even if you're not, it is a great place. We have an amazing food scene, we have an art scene, we have a music scene. So there's no shortage of activities. It is a very vibrant, bumping place for sure.
Okay, so you don't get bored there, huh?
You'd have to work really hard to get bored in Long Beach. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
I feel sorry for anybody who's bored here.
Interesting. And what about the fog? Because I know oftentimes, like in Santa Monica, in Playa del Rey, like pretty much any town along the beach, it gets pretty foggy. So what about Long Beach?
We don't have the fog that really sits in. I every once in a while you might hear the foghorns go off, but for the most part, our marine layer burns off by about 11. And to me, I really love the marine layer because it does keep our mornings quite cool, which in the summer is, fantastic. We just never, we rarely get above 80 degrees here. So, like I grew up in South Pass and I also lived in Westwood for a time. And man, you could really roast. The San Gabriel Valley in particular, it just gets so hot and obviously getting even hotter. But Long Beach stays really nice and cool. So for me, fog is never really an issue. I happen to be a rower. So I'm part of the Long Beach Rowing Association. And so I'm usually on the water between like 5 or 8 in the morning most days. And I personally love the marine layer because it's cool when you're on the water and working out intensely. But, I would say like a handful of times the fog is an issue, but that's if you're on the water, in watercraft. If you're not, it's nice. It just keeps it cool. And then of course it burns off by midday. So we have these amazing afternoons. We rarely have fog in the afternoon.
Yes. And you actually live right by the water. And this is very, very quaint area. It's called Naples. And not that many people know about it. So that must be very special to you.
Yeah, Naples is a cool little place. I like to think of it as kind of an adult theme park. It doesn't always feel quite real to me. Like it is a very unique place. So the corollary, of course, is Venice. So if people are familiar with Venice in the canals, we're very similar to that. I think we happen to be a lot nicer. So where the San Gabriel River empties into Alamitos Bay is Naples Island. And we're actually 3 little islands. But, it's a man-made island in Alamitos Bay. So we're completely surrounded by water. And we have these lovely little canals, which makes it amazing because I can walk my dog. I can circumnavigate Naples Island with my dog and never encounter a car. These protected little canals. And what's really cool about it is it creates this sense of like a little, like I said, an adult theme park, but like a little neighborhood, in my opinion, very unusual for LA County. So for instance, like we're in Halloween season right now, starting in late September and then early October, people put up the most amazing Halloween decorations. And so you walk the canals and we have like a 30-foot Nightmare Before Christmas display in one house. Other houses have these like massive dangling spiders that come down from the rooftops and everybody's lit up. And so you walk the canals, to go trick-or-treating at Halloween. And, everybody comes here for that because it does feel like a magical experience because you don't have the car traffic. So you're walking these canals with all these decorations. You feel transported. And it's the same at Christmas time as well. We have a Christmas boat parade. And so the boats come through the canals and they're all decorated. But then the houses are all decorated with lights too. So in my opinion, it's better than Disneyland.
Wow. It does sound like you live in a fairy tale.
Well, we do live in the real world. We're not completely divorced from, all that's going on in the world, but it is a very pleasant place to live. So, I happen to be, I work a lot and, I work in documentary film and I'm constantly thinking of, political issues, environmental issues and various things that I'm working on. And I will say at the end of the day, it's so pleasant to just take my dog for a walk in the canal or go out on the water and row and just remind myself how I live in such an incredibly beautiful place and how fortunate I am. Mm-hmm. So, the physical place is my sanctuary, given everything that, I could be
Yes.
focused on in the world.
Of course, of course. And maybe you can name a couple of places that are definitely your favorite. Maybe some cafe, maybe a stretch of a coastline, maybe like there are some hidden corners that you would like to share.
Yeah, well, other than Alamitos Bay, which is, of course, my favorite thing here, of course, as a rower, I'm obviously on the water, but then, whenever people come down, obviously the way I met you through a friend's birthday party, we were on a Duffy boat.
Yes.
So taking these little Duffy boats, which putt around the bay, or kayaking. I love kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding around the bay. It's very pleasant because, we're protected from the open ocean. So, you can cruise around, you can see, everybody's out swimming, paddleboarding, kayaking. It's this really lovely feeling of people being out, enjoying the environment, enjoying each other. The phones are down, the screens are off, and people are enjoying the sunshine and the water. So for me, the outdoors is, and being on Alamitos Bay is my top, enjoyment here. The other thing is we have an amazing theater here at the Art Theater on 4th Street. And it's a retrospective, old art theater. It's a single screen, beautiful Art Deco building. But the nonprofit that runs it, the Art Theater, does the most amazing job of bringing, contemporary films, but then also old prints of incredible films, and then also showcasing newer filmmakers and, esoteric or hard to find films. And so every month is a different retrospective. So like this month, again, it's Halloween month. It's all horror. And, I'm not even a horror fan, but I totally want to go see a bunch of these films because they're kind of one-time only showings. How else are you ever going to see this on a big screen? And of course, I'm a filmmaker, right? Like I'm a cinema geek. So for me, the Art Theater is an absolute treasure here in Long Beach.
Wow. Wow. That sounds like a total paradise for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely my people. I have the Art Theater. They know how to attract cinema geeks. That's for sure.
Wow. And I must say, like the way you are describing Long Beach and your favorite places and everything that you have just said, it really tells me that you're an incredible storyteller. And you have been telling stories, I know, across so many platforms for almost 2 decades now. I mean, that's quite a lot of time. And what first drew you actually to documentary filmmaking? And when did you realize that this was more than a career, that it was your calling?
Yeah, I think with any artist, it's always difficult to pinpoint a first time. It kind of, your calling is I think we resist it more than most people, especially since it's not going to be lucrative. Art is usually not lucrative. Certainly documentary filmmaking is not lucrative. So I actually was headed more towards a career in public policy. I was in grad school for public policy. But I'd had this amazing experience as an undergraduate where I was able to study abroad in Senegal. And so in living in West Africa and living with a family there, I think that experience of being such a fish out of water, I was the other, frequently the only white person, the only American. I was learning different languages. I was, living with the community. I was traveling in ways that, I think most young Americans never get to travel. And so that experience really made me think that, if more people could understand that, be able to have a window into another world, see how other people live, really immerse themselves in that, then they would develop that kind of empathy that I think we really need, to advance humanity, to be better people. So by having that experience and meeting a young Senegalese documentary filmmaker who had trained in New York, had returned to Senegal, and was really working on incredible projects, he really inspired me to think about, instead of writing papers, instead of writing books and doing great research, for policy organizations or with something like, the World Bank or the IMF, which was kind of where I was headed, storytelling and documentary filmmaking in particular really allows people that immediate access into other people's worlds.
Yes.
So as I was going through graduate school in public policy and realizing that very few people are ever going to read a white paper or, really really want to dig into scientific research. Not that that doesn't have, its place and absolute value, but more people are actually going to watch a film. So I just wanted to have bigger impact and be able to tell stories and give people that immediate window into another world, and really try to promote understanding and empathy through that.
Yes, it totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. And you have succeeded, absolutely succeeded.
Well, it's a work in progress. We're always working on different stuff. I will never say I'm a success at anything. I'm just constantly working.
Well, what I meant, success means so many different things to many people. But what I'm saying is you have succeeded in delivering your message through the medium of documentaries, because I think you're really, really good at that.
Thank you. That's very kind.
It doesn't matter how much money you make, because success is about feeling content within your own heart. That's what it means to me. And then being able to share your talent, and storytelling is definitely your greatest talent, through the medium that you found in your life that is the most accessible, the medium that speaks to you. And this is success in and of itself.
Yeah, that's a nice way to say it, for sure. Yeah, and I do feel very content. I know that I'm in the right field. Actually, one of the greatest things about documentary is the teams that you work with. Every single project I'm working with different people, and I have, not only the people that I'm telling stories about or with, but then also the filmmaking teams that I put together. That is one of the greatest things, because I get to interact with, some of the best people in the world, and we're mission driven and we're focused and we can laugh. We know it's hard what we do, but I think, have great perspective on it. And so that's one of the greatest joys of documentary, are the teams that I work with.
Yes, it's almost like a community project. Like, you have to be in touch with so many people to be able to create something out of a story.
Yes, absolutely.
And then you yourself take on different personalities almost, meaning like you're a director, producer, a writer, an editor. And it's like, wow, these are so many different kinds of work. So how do you actually balance between these roles?
Yeah, the balance is definitely tricky. It can feel like I have, 4 or 5 different jobs at one time. I think most people in documentary, we are always working on a lot of different projects at any one time, because you're, very lucky and you have full funding on a project. You're usually, switch hitting between a lot of different projects. And that also means, playing different roles. Documentary is really about being extremely resourceful. So I wouldn't say that I want to always be a director and a producer and an editor and a writer on my own projects. And from project to project, I do fill different roles, but it's by necessity. That often is because of funding or because of closeness to the project or access to the project. Like, for instance, I'm currently producing a documentary series on women in professional billiards, Q Queens. And on this, I'm a director and a producer, but I happen to have some producers on with me that have, incredible access in different ways that I don't have. And so I can lean on them to do that while I focus on the direction. For some of the shooting, I film myself, and I can edit some things myself. But in some ways, I love working with a full crew and a great DP or cinematographer. I brought an editor onto the project. So different projects require different resources. And so as a director and a producer, I have to know how to use those resources. And so sometimes that means I have to do more. And then in other times, I can bring other people on, especially when I know they're more talented than I am. So it's all about being extremely resourceful. And I think that's what filmmaking really is.
Do you prefer filling all the roles, or like several roles on a project, or would your preference be to just be a writer or just a director or just a producer? Like, what would be your preference?
I think most documentary directors just want to be a director. I mean, it's hard. It is hard to do all those different roles. For me, if I had, if the world were my oyster and I could do anything, I would just direct. I like producing in some ways, in terms of like the story development, the research. I do like that. I am a total nerd. I love research. I love talking to people. I love to be the first person they talk to, because then I can build a relationship. And so that is the producing aspect of documentary. But it is also really nice to just direct, to just think about how am I telling the story? Who's doing what? What do I need out of this scene? They really are different skill sets. I would love to just be a director, but then, it's hard to not put get my hands dirty in all the other ways too. Like, for instance, I have an editor on the project I'm working on right now, but I hired an assistant editor. I'm functioning as my own assistant editor because I want to look at all the footage. I want to go through it. I want to organize it because that's part of my ability to understand what I have, what the story is. So not to get too much into the weeds, but I think I kind of love all of the roles. I just don't want to do them all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And which role is the hardest for you?
Editing. Yeah, I've always had a hard time. So I have a very long attention span, and I think a great ability to focus and to take in a lot of information. And I really appreciate nuance. So I tend to let things go very long, from, the time I was a graduate student and made my thesis film where people were like, too long, Ash, too long. And I knew it was too long that I hadn't, and I did my own editing on that film. And it was really hard for me to edit myself. And so I think working with an editor is the greatest relationship with a director because, I would keep it all in, right? Like I love everything and I love all the aspects of the story, but editing is a way of distilling. And so for me, working with an editor is the greatest joy because they can distill and just cut through stuff and, really trim a story and make it stronger. And I think that is my, my greatest handicap is definitely editing.
Yes.
It's hard to edit myself.
It's like you get attached to scenes and you have a hard time letting them go.
Yeah. And obviously I'm not the only one, right? We all know how there's director's cuts that are, 3 hours long and almost unwatchable, right? And the director loves them, but, the average viewer is like, no, I didn't need that scene. That scene didn't give me anything. And so that's why, it's good to work with a, great editor because they can see things you can't. We do fall in love with everything. And I have often fallen in love with characters and scenes and really fought to keep them in a film and didn't need to be in. And I can see that in retrospect. So anyways, yeah. So I definitely would say like editing is my greatest handicap and the greatest joy is to work with a great editor because I think every director and producer needs a great editor.
Yes, I can see that. And Ashley, in addition to documentaries, you also write comedy and historical features in your spare time. I have no idea how you find spare time, but
I don't often, to be honest, Nasha. Yes, it is increasingly difficult to find spare time.
So how do you actually move between serious nonfiction and playful or imaginative writing that fuel your creative process?
I love this question because to me, it's that documentary is a way of exploring and sort of exploding a story. And you're following something, let's say in real time, or if it's an archival film, you're digging things out of the archive and piecing together a story, and it can go a many, many different directions. But writing fiction is so controlled, and it's really about distilling, let's say, a lot of different experiences from a different time into one story. And that story has to capture or reference a lot, but is distilled into something that's kind of bite-sized. So for me, it's a way of, like I said, I'm not the best at editing myself. Writing fiction is a way of editing myself, of getting to a smaller narrative that's more like a microcosm of, let's say, maybe a bigger story I want to tell. So for instance, I, been thinking about this project on trawling in Alaska. So, we have this terrible practice of commercial fishing that's called trawling, where they scrape the seabed floor for 3 miles and they destroy an entire column of, an ecosystem. And this is, to give us pollock for, McDonald's, fillet of fish or whatever. So, as I'm working on a documentary and thinking about, what do I need to do to talk about trawling and how do we ban trawling, especially in the Alaskan waters, our pristine waters that we should all be, motivated to protect, incredible biodiversity up there. Well, okay, what about writing a fictional story that gets that world into an hour and a half? And lets people understand that, okay, there are all these people involved and, there's this beautiful wildlife and the marine life and there's this ecosystem and there's this gorgeous landscape of Alaska, but there are all these people that are working there and that are affected. And so can I distill what could be an environmental issue documentary into a fictional piece that is an hour and a half. It takes you into a family and into a story that could be impacted by, trawling or a ban on trawling and the community conflict. And to me, it's a great way, they could be two halves of the same kind of storytelling. You want to take people into this world. You want to create empathy. You want to create knowledge. You want to, inspire and motivate people to think about action. What do they value? What do they want to protect? What do they want to do to make this world a better place for themselves and for subsequent generations? And you can do that in different ways. You can do that through a documentary, or you can do that through a fictional narrative. And to me, I like exploring fictional narrative because it is a way to distill all these things I've learned into what's a story that could have real impact, but could also be very, very true and really, get people crying or get people laughing, because with emotion, people connect to other people and that generates empathy.
Yes, this is so true. And it's fascinating. If you're talking about a problem or an issue in general, oftentimes people cannot relate to it, especially if they have nothing to do with it or if it's in a different part of the world.
Exactly.
But if you tell a story and participants of this story are like a family or a couple, or like there is a child involved, right away, everybody will be able to relate and pay attention and feel for these people. It's incredible how we relate to just one or two or three human beings, and it's much harder for us to relate to a big issue. Like it's almost too much for us, and the brain shuts down.
Absolutely. Like if you can see your family in another family, it helps you connect with them. You see your experience in another person's experience, you connect. Absolutely. I think that is the great power of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So Ashley, looking back on your journey so far, what impact do you hope your body of work will leave, maybe on the communities that you have represented or the institutions that you have collaborated with, or maybe on the next generation of filmmakers who might follow in your path?
Well, Masha, I do feel like I'm still young. I don't know that I'm thinking about my legacy quite yet. I love the idea that I might have a legacy. That's very flattering to even think about that. I haven't thought as much about what I hope I leave as much as, what I hope is my effect in the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. And especially in a media environment where people are thinking of like their 15 minutes of fame or, whatever, do they go viral on TikTok or, do they have enough followers on YouTube? I like to think about what I can bring and what I can help do is let people know that they've been seen and that they've been understood. So it's not just that I'm shining a light on them or putting a spotlight on them so that they can tell their story, for their 15 minutes of fame, but that they build knowledge. So public awareness and public education, they build knowledge of their community or their experience or knowledge around, let's say, a controversial issue. So for me, it's really, I want the people that I work with to feel that they've been seen, that they've been understood, and that their story can get out to someone who cares, who might be able to do something about that. And so, like I said, I started off in public policy. And one of my biggest frustrations in public policy was this idea of, you have to get the people in power to care and to do something on behalf of other people. And in order to get them to care, you often, especially in our political environment, it's, who's paying for your campaign and how absolutely horrific is that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, it has to be a lobbyist with money who gets to your congressperson, and that's the person they're going to listen to. We need to subvert that. We need to make sure that the stories of the people who need the representation, who need people who are in power, can speak on their behalf and do something for them. We need those stories to get to the people in power, to the congressperson, God forbid the president. I don't think he's going to listen to anything, but maybe the people in his circle will listen to it, right? So how do you get people with power to care and to listen to people, and the people who are struggling the most, the people who need help, or on issues where it is complicated? So let's inject some real information and some real nuance into the argument so that we don't create terrible policies. So if anything, for me, the work that I want to do is to make sure that people feel seen, understood, and that somehow that gets to people who are in power.
Wow. That is so touching to me, what you just said, because I think like even if one person feels seen, it can ripple, out into the world and change like the rest of the world, because you never know who this person might be, or if it's just like a simple, like ordinary citizen. It just, this is the biggest gift that one human being can give to another.
Yeah. And I will say one of my greatest joys is, even if I haven't done, let's say the greatest work or the work that's, hit a million eyeballs, just by me showing up and asking questions and saying that I care. And then I brought this crew with me and they care. That radically transforms people's mindsets. So some people who, they get a lot of attention, maybe they're already famous, they don't care so much. So, I've interviewed Nobel Prize recipients and I've interviewed governors. They don't really need my attention. They don't need my approbation. But like you said, for a common person, a person who isn't accustomed to having people ask them questions, where they get to be the arbiter of the information, right? They get to be the person who has agency in the equation. That's fairly unusual for a lot of the people that I've interacted with. So just by me showing up and asking and say that I care, it does transform their own mindset, where they feel like, oh, I do have a story to tell. And often they go on and tell it to other people as well. They feel empowered, to say, I have validity in my experience. I want to talk about it. And so, I often encourage people, like, let's say I've interviewed them or I've spent a day, following them and getting verite footage. I really encourage people, keep talking, right? Keep sharing your story. It doesn't have to be just with me or my crew. Share it on social media, write about it, go out and talk to people. And so to me, it's like a multiplier effect. Even if my project doesn't see the light of day, because sometimes, documentaries don't get the funding and they don't get out there, it doesn't mean that person hasn't had a transformative experience. And I really try to make sure that, they can stay in contact with me, I can make connections for them with, let's say, other news organizations or other nonprofit organizations. I try to share resources so that it is about continuing to develop that community and developing that person's confidence to tell their story.
Yes, yes. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for all the work that you do and that you care, genuinely care, and that you allow other people to be seen and understood and heard. So I really appreciate what you do in your life, and you're definitely making this world a better place. And I also appreciate you finding the time today to have this conversation with me and sharing it with the listeners who will get to listen to this episode. And let this be this little sparkle, little drop in the ocean, and make the world a little better as well.
That's very apropos for Long Beach as well, Masha.
Yes.
Well said.
Thank you, Ashley. Until next time.
Absolutely. Next time, let's talk Russian history, huh?
Absolutely. Yes, that would be a very interesting subject to discuss.
Absolutely. I love it. All right. I'm going to interview you next time.
I'm all up for it.
Thanks, Masha. Take care. I love what you're
you,
doing.
Keep going. You, Ashley. And I love what you're doing. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much for tuning in to Explore Long Beach with my special guest, Ashley Tindall. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform, and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can also follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California and check out my website www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. On our next journey, we'll explore Los Angeles as a mecca for writers, its neighborhoods, culture, and creative energy that inspires storytelling. It's a city full of imagination, history, and inspiration, and I cannot wait to write this story with you.
In the Mood for California. Feel the soul of Old Hollywood.